In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched humanity with amusement, believing their species to be insignificant, a fleeting blip in the grand scale of the universe. The people of Earth, just a small, unassuming planet, had managed to repel numerous alien invasions in their short history. The Council viewed humanity's survival not as a triumph of ingenuity but as sheer luck. After all, what was humanity in the face of mighty alien empires like the Draktar and the Xerxi Dominion? The Draktar, a towering species with bony, segmented exoskeletons, commanded a powerful fleet capable of destroying entire worlds with the press of a button. The Xerxi Dominion, an ancient and highly advanced empire, had crushed countless civilizations over millennia. Yet, despite their overwhelming strength, both species had found themselves at odds with humanity, and not for the first time. The catalyst was a young human general named Mara Callahan, a decorated war hero who had gained fame for her leadership in the war against the Xerxi. Her reputation was not built on military tactics alone, but on her unyielding spirit, a spirit that even the most powerful alien adversaries couldn't easily understand. She had earned a reputation for defying orders and going against logic, something that the Council had initially dismissed as reckless. But what they failed to see was that Mara's greatest strength was her unshakable belief that humanity could overcome anything, no matter the odds. The Draktar had launched their invasion of Earth in a violent strike, seeking to wipe out the humans once and for all. But as the battle raged, something unexpected happened. Humanity fought back. Not with advanced technology or superior weapons, but with an innate refusal to accept defeat. Humans, with their stubbornness and sheer will to survive, held off the mighty Draktar forces in ways that left the invaders baffled. Every time the Draktar thought they had won, humanity found a way to turn the tide. Mara, who had been overseeing the defense of Earth's eastern seaboard, was a symbol of this resistance. She had coordinated guerrilla tactics, throwing the Draktar into disarray, and showed the world what it meant to be human, relentless, resourceful, and unyielding. The Galactic Council took notice, but they were not impressed. They saw the growing resistance as nothing more than a temporary setback. Humanity, in their view, lacked the intellectual prowess and technological advancements to truly challenge the galaxy's greatest empires. They were a primitive species, surviving on sheer tenacity rather than anything resembling true strength. But Mara Callahan and her soldiers weren't thinking of the Council. They were thinking of their families, their homes, their planet. As Earth's forces fought on, the human military, less advanced in technology but more creative in its use of what they had, began to adapt in ways that stunned even the most seasoned alien tacticians. Mara's next move was to take the fight to the heart of the Draktar fleet, a bold decision that had the potential to either win the war or end humanity's resistance for good. She ordered her forces to infiltrate Draktar-controlled space, using stealth and surprise to strike at their most critical supply routes. The Draktar, who had long prided themselves on their technological superiority, were caught off guard. For the first time in centuries, they found themselves fighting an enemy who refused to adhere to their tactics, an enemy that fought with an unpredictable, unrelenting fervor. Back in the war room, the Galactic Council debated the growing human resistance. Some argued that humanity's defiance could lead to nothing more than a prolonged stalemate, while others feared that the humans were learning far too quickly. The debate raged on, but one thing became clear: humanity's stubbornness was not just an annoyance. It was a growing force that threatened to change the very fabric of the galaxy. And in the midst of it all, General Mara Callahan remained resolute. Her soldiers, human to the core, knew one truth that no alien empire could ever understand: humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or military might, it was their stubbornness. And in the face of overwhelming odds, that stubbornness had become their greatest strength. The Draktar were not used to fighting wars in such unpredictable conditions. Their empire was built on precision, order, and overwhelming force. It was a galaxy where everything was calculated, everything had a place. And yet, humanity had thrown those rules into chaos. Their strategies were unconventional, at times chaotic, but always driven by the relentless desire to protect their world and their people. It was as if the humans believed, knew, that the universe could bend to their will if they refused to yield. Mara Callahan, once again at the forefront of humanity's defense, had learned to use this unpredictability as a weapon in its own right. She began organizing her forces with a sense of urgency, exploiting every weakness in the Draktar's strategy. Her most successful mission yet was dubbed the Bait, a ploy to draw the Draktar into a trap they had never expected. The Draktar, confident in their superiority, had assumed that humanity's resistance was just another rebellion to crush. They were used to dealing with defeated planets, broken systems, worlds that fell quickly when their fleets arrived. Earth had been no different, until now. The Draktar's intelligence told them that the humans were isolated in their planetary defenses, confined to their surface, outgunned and outclassed in space. What the Draktar didn't account for was humanity's ingenuity. While they focused on conventional warfare, Mara was busy preparing humanity's most daring move, luring the Draktar into a decoy trap that would push their fleet into a series of dead zones. The plan was deceptively simple. Mara's team would feign weakness, allow a small, underpowered fleet to be ambushed. The Draktar would think it an easy victory and chase the human fleet into a sector of space where Mara had planted a series of black holes, unstable gravitational anomalies, and empty gas clouds, none of which were marked on the Draktar's navigation charts. It was a risky move, too risky by the standards of most seasoned commanders, but Mara had confidence in her troops. The first part of the mission unfolded flawlessly. The Draktar, eager for an easy kill, followed the decoy fleet straight into the heart of the trap. As they entered the dead zone, Mara's real fleet, hidden in the shadows, sprung to action. Their weapons were not as powerful as the Draktar's, but their knowledge of the terrain and their sheer determination gave them an edge. The Draktar were confused and disoriented, their mighty fleet unable to regroup in the chaotic environment that humans had engineered. The victory was swift, and it sent a message to the Draktar and every other empire that had underestimated humanity. They were not the prey they thought them to be. The humans could adapt, could think in ways that no alien species had prepared for. As the Draktar regrouped and fled, nursing their bruised pride, the Galactic Council took another look at humanity's growing resistance. Whispers began circulating within the Council's chambers. Some of the most powerful species, who had once dismissed humanity as nothing more than a nuisance, began to question their assumptions. They began to fear what a species could do when pushed to the brink, when backed into a corner with no escape but to fight. But the Council's biggest concern wasn't the Draktar, it was humanity itself. Every victory, every defiant stand, only seemed to embolden the humans further. While the rest of the galaxy plotted their next move, humanity was taking the fight to new fronts, rallying more and more systems to their cause. The human rebellion was no longer just a fluke. It was a legitimate threat. And in the midst of it all, Mara Callahan wasn't focused on galactic politics or the Council's fear. She was focused on one thing: keeping her people alive. She knew the real war hadn't even begun yet. Her next move? Rally the scattered colonies, prepare for a battle like no other, and show the galaxy the true extent of humanity's stubbornness. She knew that their resilience had only just begun to be tested. The galaxy would never forget the name of Earth. As the days turned into weeks, the human resistance began to rally more than just the citizens of Earth. Mara Callahan had always known that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its individual capabilities but in its unity. Earth was a planet full of diverse cultures, values, and ideologies, but when it came to the survival of their species, all of that was set aside. The different factions, governments, and military forces that had once struggled with internal divisions now found themselves forging alliances they had never imagined possible. Humanity's tenacity spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. Colonies that had been abandoned by Earth in the wake of early failures began to hear whispers of the Earthlings' improbable victories. The survivors of these distant worlds, many of them former outcasts and refugees from past galactic skirmishes, looked to Earth for hope. Soon, they were calling on the galaxy's forgotten colonies to unite under one banner, Earth's banner. Mara's next challenge was not just military, it was logistical. How could she organize these disparate human groups scattered across distant star systems, each with their own concerns, cultures, and leadership? Earth was no longer just the home planet, it was the symbol of resistance, the beacon for anyone who refused to bow to the empire-building aliens. With the Draktar retreating and their fleet crippled, Mara had time to build an army, a true army, not just a group of isolated colonies holding their ground. She called for an emergency summit of the remaining human colonies. It would take place on the newly established flagship, the Unity, which was hastily built from the wreckage of old, salvaged human ships and parts of the Draktar's shattered fleet. The summit was tense. Leaders from across the human colonies met under the banner of Earth, and distrust lingered in the air. The colonies had long been neglected by Earth's governments, and many feared that a renewed Earth-led government would once again subjugate their autonomy. But Mara, with her steel resolve and unshakable belief in the human spirit, stood before them all. "I didn't come here to rule over you," she began, her voice cutting through the tension. "I came here to fight for our future. For every man, woman, and child who still calls themselves human. And I need you, every one of you, to stand with Earth. Together, we can stop this invasion. We can stop the galactic empires from crushing our freedom." Her words were simple, yet they resonated with a power no one could deny. The summit became more than just a meeting, it was a turning point. Humanity realized that if they were going to survive, they would need to fight together. The idea of individual colonies was no longer enough. Their collective survival required that they forge a true alliance, one with Earth at the center but with every human colony, no matter how distant, contributing its strength. With a newfound unity, the human fleet, now a combination of Earth's military forces and those from the farthest reaches of the colonies, began its most ambitious campaign yet. Mara's plan was simple: strike at the heart of the Xerxi Dominion, the largest and most advanced empire in the galaxy. The Xerxi had long been known for their technological superiority and their brutal conquests of weaker civilizations. Their empire spanned countless star systems, and they saw humanity as a trivial distraction. They were wrong. Mara's forces, now equipped with a blend of alien and human technology, adapted, scavenged, and repurposed, had developed a fleet that was far more capable than anyone could have imagined. Earth's ingenuity, paired with the contributions of the colonies, had created a force to be reckoned with. As the fleet assembled in the shadow of the Xerxi Dominion, a sense of unity and purpose flooded the hearts of every human involved. It wasn't just the Earth-born soldiers, it was the sons and daughters of every human colony who had pledged their allegiance to the cause. The first strike was swift and brutal. Using newly adapted human tactics, Mara's forces bypassed the Xerxi's fortified defenses, exploiting weaknesses no one had considered before. The Xerxi, who had believed themselves invincible, found themselves fighting a new kind of enemy, one who could think outside the box, one who refused to follow any playbook but their own. It was a victory that sent ripples through the galaxy. The Xerxi, known for their cruelty and unmatched power, had been caught off guard. And for the first time in centuries, they had to retreat. But Mara knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's unity had been forged in the fires of necessity. Now, they would take that strength and use it to push further into the galaxy, to prove to the Council and every alien empire that humanity was no longer a footnote in the history of the stars. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the Unity fleet made its way back from the heart of Xerxi space, Mara stood on the bridge, looking out into the void of space. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but one thing was certain: humanity's stubbornness, their refusal to ever give up, had become the greatest weapon in the galaxy. And it would be enough. The victory against the Xerxi Dominion was monumental, but Mara Callahan knew that the real battle had just begun. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity's rise, but not all eyes were filled with admiration. The Galactic Council, once dismissive of Earth's stubbornness, now saw it as a threat to the very order they had worked so hard to establish. If humanity could unite and overthrow two powerful empires, what else were they capable of? Mara's victory, while celebrated by humans across the galaxy, was also met with quiet whispers among the Council's elite. The threat of an upstart human species, fueled by nothing more than sheer willpower, had unsettled even the most powerful alien leaders. They realized that humanity's resilience wasn't something that could easily be crushed, it was contagious, like a virus that spread through every colony in every world they touched. But this success came at a cost. Humanity's victory over the Xerxes wasn't without its sacrifices. Thousands of human soldiers had died in the battle, and the colonies had suffered heavy losses as they fought to protect one another. The victory was bittersweet. While the Council was distracted by the threat humanity posed, Earth's military leaders were faced with the grim reality that their forces were stretched thin. They had pushed the Xerxes back, but there were other empires in the galaxy, older and even more formidable than the Xerxes, who had taken notice of humanity's rise. The Draktar had already begun to regroup, and they weren't the only ones. One of the greatest challenges in the wake of their victory was the tension between the colonies and Earth. The colonies, while united in their hatred for the galactic empires, were still fiercely protective of their autonomy. The summit that had once united humanity had now revealed the cracks beneath the surface. Every colony had its own history, its own culture, and its own vision for the future. And while Mara had convinced them to fight together, now that the immediate threat had subsided, they were beginning to question whether they should continue to follow Earth's lead. Some felt that Earth had sacrificed them for its own survival. Others felt that Earth's leadership had been their saving grace. Mara's attention was split between the battlefield and the growing unrest among the colonies. It was a delicate balance, leading the military forces to victory while trying to keep the human alliance intact. Yet, despite these challenges, she remained steadfast. She knew that the only way humanity could survive was if they continued to work together, but she also knew that the colonies needed to feel heard, respected, and valued. Earth couldn't lead them forever, but for now, Earth's leadership was their best hope. As Mara stood on the bridge of the Unity, looking out at the stars, the weight of her responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. She had led humanity through its darkest hour, but the galaxy was vast, and its threats were many. The Xerxes had been only the beginning. There were darker, older forces waiting in the wings, and Mara knew they would come sooner rather than later. It wasn't just about fighting for survival anymore, it was about ensuring that humanity didn't lose its soul in the process. The cost of victory had already been paid in blood, and she feared that the coming war would demand even more. But there was something else. Something that the Council and the other galactic empires didn't yet understand. The one thing that set humanity apart, its stubbornness, wasn't just a trait. It was a survival mechanism. Humans didn't back down, not because they were strong, but because they couldn't imagine the alternative. They fought not for power, but for freedom. They fought not because they thought they could win, but because they believed they had no choice. And that belief, that unyielding will, was what would ultimately win them the galaxy. Mara turned from the viewport and faced her team, her mind already racing with the next steps. The next battle. The next strategy. The next impossible odds to overcome. We have to push forward, she said, her voice firm but steady. We can't afford to stop. The galaxy is changing, and we're the ones who have to shape it. We've won battles, but the war isn't over. We have to finish what we started. Her words weren't just a command, they were a promise. And humanity, bound together by the same stubborn resolve, was ready to keep that promise. Mara Callahan knew the storm was coming. She could feel it in the tension that had been slowly building throughout the galaxy. The victory over the Xerxes Dominion had been a turning point, but it had also exposed the fractures within humanity's fragile alliance. The colonies, once unified in their shared goal of survival, were now splintering under the weight of old grievances, territorial disputes, and differing visions for the future. Despite her success in rallying the colonies to the cause, Mara had always known that the true test would come when the immediate threat was gone. Now that Earth had proven its strength, many of the outer colonies began questioning the necessity of staying under Earth's command. After all, they had their own resources, their own defenses. Why should they be bound by Earth's leadership, and they had fought for their own survival just as fiercely? The first signs of this fracturing came with a diplomatic summit between several of the outer colonies and the leadership on Earth. What was supposed to be a negotiation for a unified front turned into a heated argument over the distribution of power. The colonies were demanding more autonomy, a seat at the table equal to that of Earth. They were no longer content to be subservient to a government that, to them, had been absent during their darkest times. At the summit, tensions reached a boiling point when the Cygni Dominion, a once neutral colony, made a bold proposal. They would no longer participate in the war effort unless Earth relinquished its control over their resources. The Cygni leadership, frustrated by what they saw as Earth's paternalism, argued that they had more than proven their ability to defend themselves, and they no longer needed Earth's military oversight. This sparked an outcry from Earth's representatives. Earth had been the unifying force in the human resistance, the backbone of the rebellion against the galactic empires. And now, some colonies were questioning that very leadership. Mara stood at the center of it all, trying to maintain order, but inside, she felt the walls closing in. The human resistance was on the verge of collapse, not from external enemies, but from internal division. The colonies were not the only ones who had been stretched thin by the war. Earth's own government was struggling to maintain unity, with factions vying for power, and the military leadership under strain. With no clear path forward, the once impenetrable alliance began to unravel. The fractures only deepened when news arrived that the Draktar, long thought to be licking their wounds after their defeat, had re-established their position at the edge of human space. The Draktar had been quiet for months, but now their fleets were seen moving, gathering strength, and preparing for something bigger. What was once a fleeting concern was now a looming threat. The colonies, divided and distracted by their own infighting, were caught off guard. The Draktar had learned from their previous defeat, they would not underestimate humanity again. They would strike swiftly and decisively, before humanity could consolidate its forces. Mara knew that time was running out. Humanity had no choice but to come together, or face annihilation. But the question was how? How could she, as one leader among many, convince the colonies to put aside their differences and unite once more against a common enemy? She couldn't do it alone. She would need the leaders of the other colonies to stand with her. She would need them to see that the stakes were too high to allow old wounds to fester. But she also knew that convincing the colonies to fight together again would be the hardest battle she'd ever faced. The Draktar weren't the only threat humanity had to contend with anymore. This time, it was the potential collapse of everything they had fought for. The summit had failed, but it had sparked a new resolve in Mara. She would not let humanity fracture. She had already led them through the darkness. Now, she would lead them through the storm of their own making. Mara stood in front of her fleet, watching as the ships prepared for another battle. "We don't have the luxury of time," she said, her voice steady but full of conviction. "We fight for our future, for our children, for every human who believes that we are stronger together than we are apart. We can't let the galaxy see us fall. Not now. Not ever." She knew what needed to be done. A new strategy would be formed, not just to fight the Draktar, but to heal the rifts within humanity's ranks. It was time to show the galaxy that humanity's stubbornness, its resolve, was more than just a weapon, it was the glue that held them together. The next chapter of the war was beginning, and this time, humanity would face its enemies, both external and internal, with one unified front, or face certain destruction. Mara Callahan stood before a war map, her eyes tracing the shifting lines of humanity's fractured alliances. The Draktar were on the move. The threat of their retribution had become too immediate to ignore, but more pressing still was the internal collapse of humanity's unity. The colonies, now divided and distrustful, were proving to be just as much of a danger as the galactic empires. The Xerxes had been a formidable enemy, but the Draktar were something else entirely. Known for their ruthless tactics and swift, overwhelming strikes, they had learned from their previous defeat. They wouldn't just charge headfirst into battle this time. No, they would exploit humanity's divisions, using every rift, every disagreement, to their advantage. Mara knew this well. If she didn't act quickly, the rebellion she had fought so hard to build would crumble under the pressure. Humanity's salvation now lay in one single concept: trust. Mara had been leading Earth's forces for so long, but she wasn't naive enough to think she could do this alone. The fractured alliances within humanity had to be healed before any further blood could be spilled. To do this, she would need to appeal to the very thing that had driven humanity to fight in the first place: its stubborn refusal to back down. But this time, it wouldn't be enough to just fight. They had to trust one another. They had to put aside their differences and remember why they fought in the first place. The first step in healing the rifts between the colonies and Earth was to make a bold move. Mara called for an emergency meeting, inviting the leaders of the fractured colonies, those who had begun to question Earth's leadership, those who had pulled away in the wake of the summit's failure. She didn't call them to the central hub of Earth's forces, but to the Unity, the flagship that had once symbolized humanity's coming together. It had been through unity that they had achieved victory before. Now, it would be through the same unity that they would rise again. When the leaders of the colonies arrived on board the Unity, the tension in the room was palpable. Every leader entered with crossed arms, their faces lined with suspicion and resentment. Earth's presence was no longer welcomed by many of them, but Mara knew that this would be the moment where the future of humanity would either be forged or shattered. She stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the gathered leaders. "You've seen what humanity can do when we stand together. The Xerxi, the Draktar, they believed we were nothing. But we showed them that when we fight together, we are unstoppable. This is not about Earth commanding you. This is about all of us. I stand here not as Earth's leader, but as humanity's leader. We must unite if we are to survive. The Draktar will not be kind. They will exploit every weakness. And if we fall, if we remain divided, we will be crushed." Her words hung in the air, the weight of them undeniable. But the leaders weren't convinced. They spoke up, questioning Earth's motives, accusing Earth of using the colonies as pawns in their fight for survival. "Do you think we haven't seen this before?" one leader from the Cygni Dominion snapped. "You use us when it's convenient, and when the fighting's done, we're discarded." Another leader from the Outer Rim colony added, "The moment Earth no longer needs us, we'll be left to fend for ourselves. You talk about unity, but where was Earth when we were fighting the Xerxi on our own? Where was Earth when we needed help against the Draktar's first wave?" Mara felt the sting of their accusations, but she didn't flinch. She understood their anger, their fear, and their betrayal. Earth had made mistakes, had failed them. But she also knew that the only way forward was to acknowledge those mistakes, to take responsibility, and to show that they were stronger together, not just in war, but in trust. "I failed you," Mara admitted, her voice raw with honesty. "I can't deny that. Earth's leadership has been absent, and I can't pretend that we didn't let you down. But I stand here today, asking you to take a leap of faith. We have the power to stop the Draktar. But we can't do it alone. We need each other, every colony, every world, every human." The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Mara's words was heavy, but it wasn't until the leader from the Rim colony, a grizzled veteran named Captain Jorin, spoke that the silence was broken. "Earth has never understood what it's like to live without hope. To fight every day, alone, with no reinforcements, no supplies. I was there when the Xerxi tore apart my home. I watched as our people died, one by one, without anyone to help. But you're right, Mara. We're still here. We're still standing. And I think, maybe it's time we put aside the past. For now. Because if we don't unite, if we don't stand together, we'll never survive the Draktar." Jorin's words were a turning point. Slowly, one by one, the other leaders began to speak up, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. They may not trust Earth completely, but they saw the truth in Mara's words. They had no other choice. As the meeting ended, Mara looked out at the stars once more. Humanity had made it this far by sheer will. But now, they had to take the hardest step of all, they had to trust each other. The Draktar were coming. And if humanity was to survive, they had to stand as one. Together. The vast, empty void of space stretched before them, silent and eternal. But within the confines of the Unity, humanity was no longer silent. The call for unity had been answered, not in perfect harmony, but in understanding. The colonies had come together, grudgingly at first, but now their eyes were focused on one goal: survival. Mara Callahan stood in the command center of the Unity, flanked by leaders from every corner of the human territories. They were a motley crew, each with their own battles, their own losses, and their own agendas. But right now, they were united in their resolve. The Draktar were coming, and they would not go down without a fight. The joint human fleet had assembled, a collection of ships that had once been separate but were now bound by necessity. There were warships from Earth, fighter fleets from the colonies, and supply ships that had risked everything to ensure humanity's survival. And they were ready. "We've trained for this moment," Mara said, her voice strong but resolute. "We've bled for it. Now we fight together, not as Earth or as colonies, but as humanity. This is our last chance. The Draktar will come at us with everything they have. But we will show them that we are not to be underestimated. We will show them the strength of our unity." The room was filled with the heavy hum of engines preparing for battle, the clicking of terminals as each fleet coordinated their movements. The tension was palpable, but it was also accompanied by something else, a quiet but growing confidence. Mara had led them through 100 battles, but this would be the ultimate test. The Draktar had underestimated humanity once, and they would pay for that mistake. They were arrogant, believing that Earth and its colonies would be easy prey, isolated and divided. But the one thing the Draktar never counted on was humanity's refusal to give up. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity had always found a way to survive. Now, that stubborn spirit was ready to prove itself in the most important fight of all. The fleet surged forward, a unified force prepared to face their enemies in a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. As the battle unfolded, the Draktar's arrogance quickly became their downfall. They had expected to tear through humanity's lines with ease, but instead, they encountered a resistance unlike any they had faced before. Humanity's fighters were quick, adaptive, and relentless, using their environment to outmaneuver and outthink their opponents. Mara watched from the command deck as the first waves of the Draktar ships were disabled, their power systems failing under the unexpected force of humanity's coordinated assault. It was a beautiful thing to witness, a fleet that had once been divided, weak, and vulnerable now operating as a single, indomitable force. But the battle was far from won. The Draktar were regrouping, shifting tactics, and pushing back with their infamous savagery. They had learned from their previous miscalculations, and now, humanity's ships were facing overwhelming counterattacks. Mara's mind raced as she directed the fleets, each decision carrying the weight of countless lives. But for every attack the Draktar launched, humanity's resilience met it head-on. It was clear now that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for their future. A fight for everything humanity had become. As the battle raged on, something began to shift. The Draktar, relentless though they were, couldn't keep up with humanity's adaptability. It was in their DNA, to improvise, to think, to endure. Each setback was met with a new strategy, a new plan, a new determination. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Mara watched, her heart pounding as humanity's forces pressed the Draktar back. With every tactical maneuver, with every counterattack, humanity's stubbornness, its refusal to accept defeat, became its greatest strength. The Draktar had underestimated them, thinking their rigid, brute force tactics would crush humanity, but they had forgotten one key element: humanity was not just strong in numbers, but in its ability to evolve, to outsmart, and to overcome. And as the final Draktar warship fell, the fleet's communications lit up with cheers. The battle was over. Humanity had won. The Draktar had been defeated. But the true victory was not in the destruction of their enemies, it was in the way humanity had come together. The human alliance was no longer fractured. They had fought side by side, and in doing so, they had forged a new future. Mara stood silent, her eyes on the stars beyond. The cost had been great, lives lost, alliances tested, sacrifices made, but humanity had proven that even in the face of impossible odds, its greatest strength was its unity. And that was something the galaxy would never forget. "We did it," Mara whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "We did it, because we never gave up. And we never will." the story of humanity's rise from the ashes was not one of power or might. It was one of perseverance, of stubbornness, of never yielding, no matter the cost. And that stubbornness had changed the galaxy forever.